great to be back in Sydney where the blokes are blokes and the Sheilas are too. I'm suspicious of people who root for colleges for teams they haven't attended. That's because, Elliot Blatt, at heart, you're fundamentally suspicious of the heterosexual orientation. You're fundamentally suspicious of the collectivist orientation. You're fundamentally suspicious of the normal, healthy human emotions. You're fundamentally suspicious of the things that join people together rather than rip them apart. You're fundamentally suspicious of the American way in life and love and death. All right? Well, what are you? Are you a communist or are you a pufter? Just tell it to us straight, mate. No more beating around the bush. Now, what kind of bloke doesn't appreciate football? Right? You sound like a communist more every day. So you need to support a team to get emotionally involved. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of blokes running into each other. Don't you want to have an intense emotional experience? Right? So to have an intense emotional experience, right, you need to support one team or the other. So I supported Texas Christian because they were the underdogs. I was harsh, Elliot Blatt. Yes, sometimes I am harsh, but I was harsh but fair. Okay, I think you have to admit that. So because I got emotionally involved in the game, I was able to connect to all these other people who were next to me. And at the airport last night, I had a 40-minute wait for a bus. But was this wasted time? Like in that Eagles song? No, it was not wasted time because I saw a damsel in distress trying to figure out the bus schedule. And I came over and I was her knight in shining armor. I explained to her how things work down under. She was from Germany. She works in social media. She's in Sydney for a week. Now, I told her the harsh truths and the soft, gentle truths about Sydney. And we had a wonderful conversation. I got her on the bus, got her to a hostel on time. I took care of her, made sure she's going to do the Coogee to Bondi walk today. So all these blokes at the bar today, they're also from the youth hostel. It was good, manly, heterosexual camaraderie, Elliot Black, in a sports bar, just like blokes are supposed to do things, right? This wasn't some, suspicious, race-critical stuff. Okay, so as this is your orientation, let's delve into this more deeply. And so I don't think many people realize that Elliot Blatt uses an alter ego in the chat. He's also known as Reasonable and Responsible. So Reasonable and Responsible writes about my Brazil January 6th type protests at the 20-minute, 23rd-second mark. Almost every man is attracted to all sorts of women that he can't have sexual relations with. Right? You're right, Elliot. You're right. Nonetheless, the sufficiently normal, functional, heterosexually attracted man can, however, generally expect to enjoy a viable, sanctioned outlet for regular erotic expression and sexual release. So, is this actually true? What percentage of heterosexual men, all right, expect to enjoy a viable, sanctioned outlet for regular erotic expression and sexual release? As I understand it, and from my life experience, that the half-life of a sexual relationship tends to be about 6 weeks. So I don't know many men who are in an erotic marriage. I mean, there may be some. That does not tend to be the nature of erotic excitement. So, what about the married man who wants a Hummer? Like, the Hummers usually stop by the time a couple gets married. So he simply wants a viable, sanctioned outlet. He wants a Hummer for his, favorite form of erotic expression and release. And no way, Jose, no chance. Perhaps he prefers to enter through the workman's entrance, and maybe that's completely closed off to him. Right? Many married men do not get to enter through that aperture. Right? Perhaps his thing for a viable, sanctioned outlet for such expression and release is, he needs his wife to dress up as a cheerleader, or in a Catholic schoolgirl's uniform, or speak to him in a French accent, or pretend to be reading the weather report to him. Like, most men don't really get this. There's not a whole heck of a lot of difference between your typical average man and your man who doesn't have a viable sanctioned outlet for such expression and release. Yeah, there's some. You can always find some difference, right? So you can always find ways that, two things are similar and two things are different, right? You can find ways that the Holocaust, for example, was different from all other genocides, and you can find ways that it was similar to. So you can find ways that, that the homosexual man with no permissible sexual outlet in a traditional approach to life, right? He's going to feel frustrated, and you're going to find similarities between just your regular married bloke to a woman who's also sexually frustrated, and you're also going to find differences. So just because you can find differences doesn't mean there aren't many things in common. Just because you can find many things in common doesn't mean you're not going to find significant differences. Okay, so back to reasonable and responsible. It says the sufficiently normal, functional, heterosexually attracted man can, however, generally expect to enjoy a viable, sanctioned outlet for regular erotic expression and release. So does he get to enjoy this outlet when he wants it? No, right? Overwhelmingly, men want more sex than their female partners. Female sexual desire falls off a cliff after the first year. Absolutely falls off a cliff. So for the first year of a coupling, it tends to be in the same ballpark. After the first year, it just absolutely falls off a cliff. So in a form and within a context, it need not be anything less than fully consistent with his moral values and sensibilities. Well, most married men, don't really get to have, the type of sex that they most want. See that critical difference? Well, you can always find a difference between two things. Doesn't mean there also aren't tremendous similarities. The same simply cannot be said for the exclusively homoerotically attracted men. Okay, first of all, most homosexuals are not exclusively homoerotically attracted. Most homosexual men, most men who identify as homosexual, have had sex with women. So we're not talking here about most homosexuals. Most heterosexuals cannot get the type of sex that they want, right? There are all sorts of, forms of sex and types of people they want to have sex with, for whom there's absolutely no chance. Most heterosexual men would like to have sex with a model, an actress, a porn star, someone like that, and that's simply not on offer. Right, back to the commentary here. The same simply cannot be said for the exclusively homoerotically attracted man, for whom the expression and pursuit of such proclivities is less than acceptable, personally or socially, morally or practically. Okay, the exact same thing can be said for virtually every man for whom the expression and pursuit of a great deal of his proclivities is less than acceptable. So there are, a few proclivities that the married heterosexual man can pursue that the homosexual man can't. But given that the vast majority, for all of us, we cannot pursue our proclivities. For the vast majority of us, there is no appropriate moral or social outlet for many of the things that we would like to do. Right? This is just as true for your average heterosexual man as it is for your average homosexual man. Right? Almost everyone at one time or another wants to go kill someone. There is no socially acceptable form for expressing that. None of this is to imply any normalization of homoeroticism, only to point out the flaw in your argument. Okay, and reasonable and responsible says, mocking prayer itself is no better if I'm mocking the idea of praying the gay away. Well, I do mock, for most people, the idea that prayer can be the primary thing that keeps them from committing certain behavior that they wish they didn't commit. Right? I think prayer can be a component. It can be a relatively small part of your arsenal to try to lead the life that you want to lead. But overwhelmingly, it's not going to get it done. All right? Prayer is not going to cure homosexual tendencies or adulterous tendencies or desiring to cheat in business or whatever it is that you're working on. Prayer is rarely going to be the primary thing that keeps you from doing the things that you wish you did not do.